Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Get Down to Business. I'm your host, Shalom, Klein, and it is a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation, having Adam Rentschler here on the program. Adam is the co-founder and CEO of Valid Evaluation, the evidence-based assessment platform for U.S. government innovation programs. But perhaps more importantly and more exciting, he's a three-time CEO and has founded two companies. He is a recovering, and I think this is your own self-description over here, a recovering engineer and venture capitalist. So Adam, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. So I want to start by getting to know the person behind the microphone. You have quite a story over there, having started a number of different companies. Adam, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So for those tuning in Chicagoland, I went to Northwestern for my undergrad and studied material science there. And after college, moved out to the Bay Area and have been in the high-tech world ever since. So after 3 years of working full-time for a motion and machine control company, set off on my own to found a company called BetterVote. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey.
That's fantastic. And an entrepreneurial journey is probably the very appropriate way to say it, because its journeys have its twists and turns, and so does entrepreneurship as well. So Adam, I mentioned in the intro over here that Valid Evaluation is the evidence-based assessment platform for U.S. government innovation programs. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then I really want to dig into some of the lessons learned on that journey, that entrepreneurship journey that you just mentioned. So what is Valid Evaluation? What do you guys do?
So we help facilitate group decision-making for government agencies where groups of experts come in to decide what sort of technologies, for example, the Army ought to be adopting to make sure that our soldiers are the best equipped in the world. And increasingly, that's a race against near-peer rivals like China. And so these are very complicated decisions, and they have to be made crisply. They have to be made in a way that's consistent with the Army program manager's needs. And they have to be made increasingly with an eye on satisfying the small business community, because the Army and the rest of the U.S. Department of Defense have realized that partnering with entrepreneurs who are doing their own small business thing is really the only way that the U.S. can stay ahead. So that's what we're up to. It's this notion of very complicated group decision making. We bring an evidentiary basis to that. Aid with lots of efficiencies in that process. And best of all, from my perspective, provide actionable feedback to every single company that interacts with the government so that they can understand exactly where they fell short and how their business can improve to reattack next time.
Yeah, and that's critical because we're in an environment where budgets are stretched thin, and it's all about making every dollar count and stretch as far as it can. And frankly, we owe that to those that are in uniform and those that are serving, to make sure that things are working effectively. But we owe it to the taxpayers as well. And so certainly that's everything that Valid Evaluation is getting after. So Adam, going back for a moment to your journey. The work that you do for U.S. government, that didn't happen on day one, I'm assuming. How did you get to this point?
It happened in year 8 of the journey for this company. So you're exactly right. It took us a long while to get here. And the origin story of Valid Evaluation is that it was born out of my frustration as an entrepreneur with the lack of feedback that was happening when we as entrepreneurs are trying to get after venture capital dollars or angel investment or government grant funding. And often, whoever is making that decision and passing judgment upon us as entrepreneurs, they're truly expert, right? And they truly do have the best intentions in mind. But too often, there was little to no feedback that was flowing out to the entrepreneurial community. And I viewed that as a tremendous waste of time, because as long as we had these people impaneled, and as long as these people were coming in to pass judgment on us as entrepreneurs, why the heck didn't we have anything to show for it in terms of learning by the entrepreneurial community, those who are having judgment passed upon them?
That's absolutely correct. And Adam, one of the terms that's often associated with you and with your organization is innovation. Innovation, and I know that that's why the U.S. government has turned to you and your colleagues for resources. So I want to dive into that over the next minute or so, and then we're going to take a break and provide some real helpful, I think, information to entrepreneurs that might be tuning in. But what does innovation mean, and what's that sort of takeaway that you want our small business audience to walk away with?
Well, so innovation means doing something, solving a problem that's never been solved before. I think that's one way to talk about it. And it turns out that when you sit in judgment of innovation, it's a really complicated thing. And in fact, prior to valid evaluation coming along and applying the best practices and assessment to this discipline, the best we could do was sort of the old Justice Potter Stevens approach, which is to say, hey, I have no idea how to define this, but I know it when I see it. And I know it when I see it is not a very satisfying thing to tell an entrepreneur when you say, hey, your innovation doesn't cut the mustard. We're not going to be accepting your special thing. We're doing something else. And here's a two paragraph, very polite form letter that tells you nothing except that you've been very clearly rejected.
Absolutely. Again, I'm chatting with Adam Rentschler, the co-founder and CEO of Valid Evaluation. Adam, I know your story. You and I have talked. You've said that you've thrown hundreds of pitches in the trash and have been told no far, far, far more times than you've been told yes. But obviously, that's the journey. And now, now several. Quite a handful of years later, certainly here on the flip side of that, and able to give a lot of great advice. And advice, indeed, that's what we're going to share. We're going to talk about mentorship when we return after this very quick break on the show, all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. So don't touch that dial. More with the co-founder and CEO of Valid Evaluation when we return. Hey, welcome back, Chicago. You're listening to Get Down to Business, and I've been chatting with the one and only Adam Rentschler, the co-founder and CEO of Valid Evaluation, the evidence-based assessment platform for U.S. government innovation programs, as well as just truly a recovering engineer, venture capitalist, and entrepreneur. Perhaps that's the best title of all, is entrepreneur. So, Adam, we've been chatting about your story and chatting about the advice that you've been that you've learned along the way. But I know you've been surrounded by people that have given a lot of advice and a lot of time to you. So let's shift our conversation to that. You and I were talking offline about mentorship. Tell us about the mentorship experiences that you've received and what advice you'd give to future mentors and mentees.
I don't think there's anything unique in what I'm about to say. I bet many of your listeners have shared this experience. There's really nothing more powerful in one's entrepreneurial experience than to have people surrounding you that can give you good advice. These are people that are often more experienced. Perhaps they have a longer track record in your particular industry. But goodness knows, none of us have all the answers, and there's nothing more powerful than the one-to-one human to human advice giving and taking. And if you're a smart entrepreneur, I think you'll number one, seek that out as much as you can, and number two, listen carefully and do your best to incorporate those lessons into what it is that you're doing.
Adam, what would you say was that aha moment for you in business? That moment where you realized that you're throwing things out there that you might actually be onto something, because we know that in order to get to that one yes, you've got to go through so many other no's. So what's that one maybe tip, that nugget that you have that might save some of our listeners a couple of years?
Oh man, I think that there's nothing magic here. I think that let me talk about what I think the most difficult thing is, and this is maybe a little bit different way to answer your question, but as you mentioned, I'm one of these people that's been told no more times than I can count, right? And so I think what's really difficult in the previous two companies that I was CEO of, I probably should have listened to the no's sooner and given up the ghost sooner. And with valid eval, with all the success that we're having now, had I listened to the no's, I wouldn't be enjoying the success that we're having. So in CEO endeavor number 3, walls out to be the right thing. And in the previous 2 companies, man, I wish the first couple walls that I hit so hard, I had learned like, ooh, those broken bones hurt. I'm going to stop running at that wall because that doesn't feel good. So, it's in retrospect, it's easy to see when the no's were a valid signal. But I don't know that you can do it in the moment. I think that's one of the most difficult and frustrating things about being an entrepreneur, is figuring out when the no should be ignored and when the no should be listened to.
That's powerful. And Adam, I know you earned your MBA at the University of Texas at Austin and a bachelor's at Northwestern University. And those lessons that you just shared, that's not taught in school. That's taught in the real world indeed. So Adam, I want to make sure our listeners know where they can get a hold of you and Valid Eval. In our final 30 seconds, can you share how we can get in touch?
Sure. Valideval.com is probably the easiest way. And valideval.com/insights is where we hope to post this particular podcast. If you'd be so kind to share that with us, I think our community would love to know about your show.
Absolutely. Well, looking forward to having future conversations with you, Adam, and thank you for sharing your candid advice, stories of success, but also that journey that I know you and I are both so passionate about. So, believe it or not, that's a wrap here on Get Down to Business. What a great number of conversations that we've had with Natasha Trinov, Igor Fedenkov, and Adam Rentschler. To success, let's get down to business. We'll talk to you next Sunday at 6 p.m. right here on AM 560 The Answer.